Hey there, you awesome people! I hope your day has been nothing short of fantastic. Welcome back to a brand new episode of What If Deku's memories was altered. Instead of Katsuki Bakugou getting kidnapped, Izuku Midoriya risks his life and ends up being taken by the League of Villains. A rescue is ensured, but instead they come face to face with Deku next to All for One, calling him Sensei. They discover that Deku's memories had been altered from the point when Bakugou tells him to jump off the school roof to be reborn with a quirk. Don't forget to shower some appreciation onto the incredible author responsible for this fanfiction. The link is conveniently waiting for you in the description box down below. If you're totally vibing with this what-if scenario, drop me a comment and let your thoughts be known. And while you're at it, don't miss out on other mind-blowing what-ifs on this channel. Alright, without further ado, let's dive straight into this video. The event that took place during the summer training camp had produced results that no one foresaw. 11 injuries, ranging from minor to severe. 13 were injured. 1 had gone missing. The entire city, maybe even world, had taken the event and mucked up a mass media storm. How could you doubt a school that was supposed to train future heroes, allow something like this to happen? Of course, the media was only interested in what would rile people up. All they heard was villains and kidnapped, and they went to have their own field day. This time was different than the villain attack Class 1A had over at USJ, where they had all been able to escape with minimal injuries. This time they had not. In fact, it was very possible a good amount of students could have died. Not only that, but a student had gone missing, number 14 of Class 1A, Izuku Midoriya. While everyone had voiced their concerns, worries and fears, it was the people who had saw him right before the kidnapping that made them think the worst. Izuku Midoriya was in critical condition. His limbs had been torn and bruised from overusing his quirk. The only reason he had gotten as far as he did was because of adrenaline. Now that he was in the clutches of the League of Villain, in such a state no less, would they show mercy on him? Every single one of Class 1A's students had those thoughts circling in their minds. Class 1A, minus Toru Hagakure, Kyukujairu, Momo Yayorozu and of course Izuku Midoriya, had all gathered inside of Katsuki Bakugou's hospital room. The boy had bandages around his hands, his brows furrowed deeply at them instead of acknowledging his classmates who had come in to wish him recovery. Mineta was holding a bag of bell peppers, as a melon would have been pretty pricey for Bakugou. "We got you some bell peppers," he spoke up, slicing through the thick silence. No responses. The class could only stare at each other in the awkward air. It wasn't until Ijiro Kirishima walked up to Bakugou's bedside, placing a hand on the railing and a fist forming in the other. "Look! This time around, let's save him!" The sudden exclamation caused Bakugou to spin his head around and look at his classmate, dead in the eyes. Bakugou's mind began reeling. Thoughts of what had happened began playing back, vividly in front of him. Kei-chan! He couldn't see anything in that moment. He was trapped in some orb or whatever. But he could clearly hear that brat's annoying voice scream out his dumb nickname. Stupid Deku. What could he do anyways? At a blink of an eye, there was a loud bursting pop noise and Bakugou was back in the forest, stumbling backwards. He could only take in his surroundings for a few seconds, though it seemed like an eternity. People were behind and in front of him. His classmates who, for the love of God, he's never really known by name, were catching both his and Tokoyami's fall as they both were released from their ball imprisonment. The villains in front of him were retreating back into the black, misty portal except in one of their arms was Deku. The villain had his hand at Deku's throat, keeping a strong grip on his shoulder as well. Bakugou had noticed beforehand that the tentacle guy was carrying Deku around for a while, and the reason was evident. The amount of strain and injuries he received on his body was massive, absolutely destructive. Bakugou knew his quirk's limits, but obviously Deku didn't, or he chose to ignore them. Again an idiot. His brain finally caught up to speed as he watched Deku be taken by the villains in his stead. Bakugou's arm went out, flickers of explosions readying itself desperately as the villains retreated. "DKU!" he screamed out. In that instant, only he saw the lights reflecting in Izuku's eyes. Glimmers of tears accompanied a small, shaky smile. "Kachan, I'm so glad," the boy whispered softly, maybe low enough to make sure he didn't heard but he fucking heard it. And with that, the portal closed. The students was left in the forest by themselves, taking in the utter defeat. Anger, frustration, concern, more anger, and also some anger had whirled around in Bakugou's chest. He was never one to express his emotions honestly, and not to strangers even if they were classmates at the very least. He didn't know what he wanted at the moment. Everything about the night seemed like a really bad dream. Look, Todoroki and I were here yesterday, and we happened to hear a conversation with Yaoyorozu and… Kirishima rubbed the back of his head while Todoroki took the lead to explain. He looked down at Bakugou, meeting fiery eyes with his cool ones. She placed a tracking device on one of those monsters. Yaoyorozu is giving the police one to track them down, he explained softly as the other classmates listened. Tenya Ida, or who Bakugou considered as Fast Four Eyes, had grabbed a hold of both Kirishima and Todoroki's shoulders. We can't. This is a matter we should leave to the professionals. This isn't something we as students should be meddling in. He nearly screamed out, but a chorus of hushing noises helped Ida catch his voice. Kirishima could only grimace and clutch at his chest. Damn it, man, I know that. But I still couldn't do anything. You didn't either. The jab caught Ida stricken. Both students clenched their fists. We heard Bakugou was being targeted, but we couldn't do anything. I didn't do anything about it. And everyone got hurt and Midoriya got dash. He stopped himself, swallowing hard. If I don't do something about it here, then I won't be able to call myself a hero. Everyone around had tried to hush the students until he turned back to Bakugou. Listen, everyone knows you and Midoriya's got some weird beef or whatever. But you've known him the longest, right? He risked his life to save yours, so it's only right that we go and save him. The class went quiet. Bakugou went back to stare at his hands, pondering, aggressively thinking. He too stayed quiet, since he had no idea what to say or what his honest self was telling him. His mind grew dizzy again. The reality of the situation was more than he could ever take in. The class only waited for Bakugou's response, but he had already tuned everyone out. Visions of the past played once again. Kachan, are you hurt? Can you get up? Shut up, Deku. Because I couldn't just stand around and watch you die. Shut up. DKU. Kachan, I'm so glad. A roar of anguish filled the room as Bakugou clenched his bandaged fists and banged them down on the bed repeatedly. The entire class jumped in shock, some even escaped out of the room. He continued to beat his hands down again and again, each time with more vigor fueled by hatred. Every fucking time he goes and pulls some shit like this. I didn't ask for fucking help and he looks at me like I'm some weakling that needs saving. I would have been fine if they took me. So if he's all powerful and great, then he should be able to get himself out of that shit. I ain't gonna help that son of a bitch, he can die for all I care. He screamed out. Bakugou's face was towards the bed, but every single one of the classmates still inside the room had felt the vicious, frontal attack from where they were. The shocked silence was broken by footsteps approaching Bakugou's bed and a hard slap. Uraraka's eyes brimmed with tears, but her eyebrows furrowed in anger and disgust. Whether you wanted it or not, Deku risked everything to save you. That's something a real hero would do. And if you're going to look down on that, then you should quit now. You're not hero material. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she turned and stormed out of the room, followed by a few of the other classmates until only Kirishima stayed there next to Bakugou's side. He didn't move from when Uraraka slapped him. The time to be furious had passed. Deep down, Bakugou knew he didn't mean what he said, at least not the last part. He was always one to talk about killing and death, but never would he choose to take someone's life. Bakugou was being defensive. There were too many people there, and he wasn't able to share how he really felt. If Deku did die then… Bakugou, Kirishima whispered softly. He turned his head to look up at him. I know that. You don't mean that. Whether you come or not, me and Todoroki are leaving tonight. His words became softer, Kirishima's eyes looking to the ground as well. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe you don't care about him. But he sure as hell cared about you, and he's our classmate and friend. I'm still inviting you because, well, I think you do want to rescue him too. Bakugou turned his face away from the redhead. Get out. Kirishima blinked in surprise before sighing, rubbing the back of his neck. He turned on his heels to the door, and with one look at Bakugou he left. It was true though, he did want to rescue Deku. He didn't want Kirishima to see him blink away frustrated tears before letting them out with a cry. Bakugou had taken the party by surprise when he met with the students outside of the hospital. Kirishima's face had lit up, giving him a bright grin as they discussed what their plan of action was. The rescue team was Kirishima, Todoroki, Bakugou, Yaoyorozu, and even Ida. While the class president was there to persuade them to stop what they were doing, he was convinced by the idea of a non-combat rescue mission and a quick chat with Todoroki. No one really heard what they were talking about, out of privacy, but Bakugou was able to hear Todoroki softly say, "You know, if you were the one kidnapped, he'd try to rescue you. Everyone in class knew that Deku's friends were mainly Ida and Uraraka, and even though Bakugou didn't know this, it seemed like the bonds Deku had made were as strong as steel. Bakugou wondered if it were anyone else, would Ida have agreed to come along despite the potential risks? He answered it with a no. With Yaoyorozu's tracking device, they'd pinpointed the chip to be located in the Kamino ward. The bullet train ride to the region was awkward, filled with a kind of silence that was only broken up by discussion between Ida and Todoroki. They sat across from each other, and while Todoroki and Kirishima were eating at their store-bought meals, Ida expressed his position as watchman to all of them. I want all of you to remember what we're doing is extremely dangerous and that we are to avoid combat at all costs. He had directed most of the speeches to Bakugou, who only grunted and sneered in response. Listen up, Four Eyes, I don't give a shit about what you say, but I'm not going to run in without a plan. Bakugou crossed his arms and glared him down, which only gave Ida more fuel to spout his speeches. Everyone knew him to be the person with the least likeliness to cooperate, but he wasn't an idiot. Bakugou understood it was virtually impossible to achieve their mission without relying on each other. Much to his dismay, they all had ended up with a disguise. Dumb disguises is what Bakugou thought as he tugged on his collar and scratched at the beanie they had him put on. He was ready to tear apart the sunglasses and fake goatee until Kirishima had reassured he looked like a super cool dude. Bakugou left it alone but nearly socked Kirishima in the face when he tried to get him to do some sort of accent. Lucky for him, Kirishima always knew when to activate his quirk to protect himself from Bakugou's fists. All four of them walked towards the tracking point's location, with Ida constantly reminder of to not engage in any form of combat. In order to keep suspicion from the regular pedestrians, they all had crammed themselves into the side of the building the tracking device had pointed to. Kirishima had brought out a pretty expensive night vision camera and hoisted himself on top of Todoroki's shoulders. Bakugou followed, stepping onto Ida's shoulders despite his unwillingness. When they saw that only Numas were inside of the facility, everyone's hearts sank. While no one knew what the Numas were, from the many they'd fought and seen, everyone understood that they weren't normal. Was it possible that Deku was inside of this facility as well? With the Numas, everything that occurred next happened in a blink of an eye. Mount Lady had come with other pro-heroes and police enforcement to smash the building down and rescue and retain those that were inside the building. The destruction left the five of them stunned, scrambling up on the ledge to see what was happening. Mount Lady, gang the Orca, even number 4 hero best genist is there, Kirishima shouted. As the pro-heroes rounded up all the Numas and rescued those who were taken, Ida announced that they should all leave it to them and head back now. He seemed far too happy to leave, but Bakugou stayed put. There was something off. Something in the air was telling Bakugou that it wasn't going to be this easy. Something inside Bakugou's stomach churned, and before he knew it, wham! If possible, I'd like to ask for you all to stop interfering. The aura around them dropped. It was almost as if they had come face to face with the Reaper themselves. All 5 of them had their backs to the wall. The entire block had been destroyed in 1 second. The sound of slow clapping lingered as the man in the dark praised Best Genist. As expected of the number 4 hero, I was trying to blast everyone away, but in an instant you controlled everyone's clothes and pulled them out of the way. Your judgment, your technique, you've got nerve of steel. Isn't that so, Izuku? Bakugou froze. Every single of them had heard what the man had said, yet no one's body would move. Every single one of them was paralyzed by fear, Bakugou included. Yaoyorozu had vomited to the side. That's definitely Best Genist for you. Not only does he have a versatile quirk that can affect anyone who's wearing clothes, he's also known for his swift judgment. The voice was Izuku Midoriya's. Every single one of them recognized it. It was Bakugou who finally turned his head to see Deku standing there, next to the man in the dark suit. He looked fine. His injuries were gone. He was smiling like he was back at school with his friends, but something was off. Deku was in his hero outfit, but wasn't at the same time. It was a darker, black Air Zion of what he wore with modifications. While his face still seemed soft, there was something about his eyes that made him look tired. Black liquid began forming and spilling out villains, those specifically from the League. The guy with the hands, Bakugou remembered it was something like Shigaraki, landed in front of the man who seemed to be death himself. Tamura, I know your goal was to take the Bakugou boy, but I'd like you to know you did not fail with your replacement. The man placed a hand onto Deku's shoulder. Bakugou was ready to stand up and run over when Ida placed a hand on him, shaking his head as he covered his own mouth. He gritted his teeth, hands balling into fists as he stood there, watching like some sort of bystander. You've actually found us the key to success. With Izuku, we can finally rip apart one for all. Shigaraki Tamura only slouched himself, scratching at his neck. Sensei, I didn't know you had such tremendous power. Before he could say anything else, All Might had appeared and tried to land a hit on the man. The fight ensured. Bakugou couldn't keep an eye on everything that was going on, from the man, to All Might, to Tamura, to Deku. I want you to remember, Tamura. You can still grow so much more. My gift to you is this boy. He will be the key to your success. With his fingers, it zipped over to the unconscious Warp Gate villain, forcing his quirk to activate. Izuku, go with Tamura, but Sensei dash. Deku looked up at him before All Might came back. Oich, no you don't. I'll be rescuing Midoriya. The man fended off All Might, throwing him onto his back. The Warp Gate grew larger as the suited man used whatever his quirk was to pull the villains into the Black Warp Gate. Before any of them could get in, Bakugou finally sprung up and over the wall. DKU! He screamed out, using his explosions to propel himself towards the gate. All Might turned towards Bakugou, shocked before he yelled out, Bakugou! Get back now! Before he knew it, Deku's body jolted forward towards Bakugou despite the magnetism, and punched him square in the face. He hit the wall, cracking the cement as the other students jumped over the wall to assist him. The man turned towards them. Oh? Izuku, is this the boy you've been telling me about? Deku nodded in response, a grin appearing on his face. Yeah, this is Kachan, he replied. The man only chuckled, turning back to All Might. Very well. Tamura, I'll send Izuku to you soon. I'm sure right now he has his own battle to face. With that, Tamura and the other villains were pulled into the Black Warp Gate, leaving Izuku Midoriya standing there, grinning towards Katsuki Bakugou. All Might's voice rang through the battleground. What did you do to him? The number one hero ran towards the man, throwing a punch which was blocked. Not much, really. I only tweaked with some memories. Don't worry though, he still idolizes you. I couldn't get rid of that. The man chuckled and black lines from his fingertip charged at All Might. Izuku, I'll let you have your fight. Thank you, Sensei. Deku's face lit up, almost like a child who was given permission to eat another cookie. It pissed off Bakugou. What the fuck, Deku? What's wrong with you? Brainwashed, huh? Just do the thing you did back at the sports festival and snap out of it. Bakugou screamed out, his personal rage fueling him to act without thinking. Ida and Kirishima had helped him back up, all of them keeping their eyes on Deku. Todoroki called out after him. Midoriya, we're here to rescue you. Whatever's going on, you can pull through. Deku only blinked in confusion as the man laughed while fighting All Might. The destruction from the two's fight was overwhelming, but there was nothing the Udata students could do unless they wanted to leave behind Deku. I don't know who you are, but it seems like you know me? I didn't know Kachan had friends. Deku furrowed his brow, fists clenching. Wow, that's really amazing, Kachan. It's been only a year since we've seen each other, and you're here with friends. While I'm alone. Bakugou's eyes widened. What the fuck was going on? Yaoyorozu placed a hand on his shoulder. He doesn't know us, only you, Bakugou. I think he definitely is brainwashed in some way, but there could be more to this. She explained, biting her lip as she watched her classmates slowly turn his smile into a frown. He still has his personality. Talk to him. Midoriya's one to talk. Bakugou didn't want to fucking talk. He wanted to really punch Deku in the face right now. Yaoyorozu was right though. There seemed to have been some kind of brainwash in play. If it was similar to Shinse's brainwashing, then that means there must be some sort of limit or trigger to release the quirk. The others seemed to have realized that too, so the best form of action right now was to keep Midoriya talking, maybe even taunt him closer. It would be risky and any assurance of the mission being non-combat was out the window. You said a year, huh? I don't even remember the last time we saw each other. You're just that small to me. Bakugou yelled out, grinning as he got his hands ready. That seemed to bring Deku's face back to a soft, nervous look. Ida, on the other hand, was not as pleased. Do you remember back in middle school? We both were applying to Udate, and you told me that I couldn't do anything since I was quirkless. Deku looked down and clenched his fists. And then, do you remember what you told me? You said, hey, I know a way for you to get a quick. Maybe if you jump off the school roof you can die and be reborn with a quirk. Bakugou's face dropped. His classmates turned to look at him, terrified. Did you say that to him? Todoroki whispered softly. The silence and then the sound of a swallow gave them the answer. Well, I wasn't going to at first, but as I was walking home I got taken by a villain, a sludge monster. All Might came to save me actually, and I asked him, you know, me and you look up to him so much, and he was there in front of me. So I had to ask if it was possible I could still be a hero even without a quirk. All Might had heard every word and tried to call out to him, but was silenced by Sensei and the destruction going around. He told me I couldn't. And deep down I knew that too, but for some reason I felt that All Might would have told me that maybe I could have been. So I went back to school, went up to the roof and did exactly what you told me to do. Deku looked up to stare at Bakugou, dead on. I didn't die, but I was reborn. Sensei found me and he told me that I could be a hero. Then he gave me a quirk. So now I can be a hero, and to prove it, I'm going to defeat you, Ka-chan. Deku clenched his fists and charged towards the students. Ka-chan, stunned, quickly got into a stance to take him on. For the first time though, he wasn't able to smile. Before either of them could do anything, Todoroki placed up a giant wall of ice to keep Deku from coming. If he doesn't know us, he won't know our quirk. We have to leave, now. He explained sternly to his classmates, ushering them up. What? No! I can beat him. I'll knock him out and then we'll take him back. Bakugou screamed as the ice shattered, a fist coming through it. Todoroki quickly used his flames to melt the shards that were flung by the impact. None of them were in their hero outfits. It was too dangerous to fight, especially with All Might and the man having their destructive battle so close. We need to go, now! Todoroki yelled out, pulling them all back. Deku stared at all of them, causing all of them to freeze as their hearts dropped. In that instant, Izuku Midoriya looked like he was ready to kill. I'm not letting you go that easy, Ka-chan! Another fist came down but was blocked by Kirishima's arm. There was a cracking noise as Kirishima yelled out in pain. Fuck! He's too strong! The hardening wore off and was replaced with a bruised, bloodied arm. Bakugou looked at it, gritting his teeth. There was no other option. They had to get out of there. It'll be okay, they'll get out, regroup, they'll rescue Deku later. He was alive and that's what was important. Even if the fucking idiot got himself brainwashed. But now, they had to leave in order to give All Might a chance to win. Everyone look away! Bakugou held his hands close, pointing out towards Deku. Everyone turned as he unleashed a concentrated explosion at Deku, who blocked it with his arms. The boy flew back onto the ground as Bakugou grabbed a hold of Ida's shirt. Fucking go! He cried out, Ida nodding in response. They all grabbed onto Ida as he used his quirk to swiftly get out of the area of action. Oh no you don't! Deku gotten up and jumped towards them, a fist ready to land when all of a sudden All Might appeared to block the punch. Get out of here! I'll take care of the rest! All Might grabbed onto Deku's hand and punched him in the face, sending him flying backwards once again. I'm sorry Midoriya, my boy! He turned towards the children who have raced off, away from the action and into the streets. No one knew how long it took them to get away so quickly, but everyone's minds began reeling as they were stuck in a crowd who were being escorted by police officers and other traffic control mediators. No one said a word to one another as they were being funneled into the main streets as helicopters flew in every direction towards the fight. Everyone directed themselves towards the screens up on high buildings as they went from whatever commercial they were playing to the fight at hand. From high above, they were able to see both All Might and Deku. His voice was low, but audible when projected on the loudspeakers. You were my hero! I've always wanted to be like you, All Might, so why didn't you tell me I could be a hero? He screamed out, getting his fists ready. The man in dark suit came over, placing a hand onto Deku's shoulder. All Might grimaced deeply, his fist shaking. No Midoriya, that's not what happened! He yelled out. How could All for One erase all of the memories from that point? How was he able to implant new ones? Who had that ability, and what were the ways to dispel the effects? All Might continued to reach out to Deku. You can be a hero! You are a hero! Izuku Midoriya! I know you! His eyes widened, tears glistening. All Might, you're only saying that now cause I'm in front of you, with a quirk, with a power. Why didn't you tell me that before? Deku screamed out. He ran toward him but was quickly stopped by All for One. That's enough for you, Izuku, go back to Tamura. He placed a warp gate behind them as Izuku reluctantly got in. Sensei, what about you? His voice shook before All for One looked back to All Might. Whatever happens to me, Tamura will succeed me. Help him. Deku nodded his head and went into the gate. No! All Might raced towards the warp gate but was stopped when All for One aimed a destructive blow towards a civilian. At the last second, All Might turned to protect the woman, and then lost his form. Bakugou watched the events unfold. He listened to words like successor and All for One, and didn't understand anything that was going on. Even when All Might's true form was revealed, he cried out for him to win. As other heroes came to help and lighten the load, Bakugou heard the man say something but the speakers cut off. Only All Might heard this in the moment. Izuku Midoriya, the boy you passed it to, huh? To be honest, I was going to kill him and make him feel every bit ounce of regret. But the opportunity presented itself. Isn't it sweeter? To see the boy who was going to be your successor fall into my hands. I'll be honest, when I saw him, I swear he was my younger brother for a second. He laughed. It won't matter what the results are now. You lose either way. To be a teacher is to help your pupil stand up by himself. It seems you haven't been doing that good of a job. It might have been a result from your previous teacher. The last moment of the fight gave an incredulous explosion. It ended with a United States of Smash. It ended with one fist raised into the air. It ended with cheers from every part of the nation. It was victory. Victory for everyone else except the chosen few. If Izuku Midoriya had been watching next to him, Bakugou was certain he'd be crying endless amount of tears. He wasn't there, however, which meant what the five of them ultimately had sought to do ended in a complete failure. The next morning the world was in a state of chaos. Bakugou and the others had all gone their separate ways, quiet, deep in thought, and in mourning. Everyone had been able to go back home to their families, except for Deku. The road to his house was familiar to Bakugou, walking past it every time he went to elementary school in the past and on the occasions where he had come over to grab Deku for their daily adventures as children. As he walked past the Midoriya's household, he couldn't help but see the police vehicles lined up outside. He knew what that meant. He could also hear Deku's mom crying loudly, begging for help from the police who were trying to reassure her the best to their abilities. Bakugou grabbed at his shirt, gripping it tightly as he gritted his teeth. He tried to keep walking but stopped a few feet away from the house. He doubled over, eyes brimming but refusing to let them stream. He held his breath behind pulled back teeth. Bakugou wasn't going to scream. He didn't need to as the sound of Inko Midoriya's wails of sorrow echoed through the neighborhood. He wasn't strong enough to save Deku. They had to run away like pathetic losers. Bakugou didn't know what was a better scenario. The fact that Deku could be dead versus Deku being brainwashed into a villain. If it was him, he'd rather be dead than turn villain. Of course he'd fight his ways out first, but would rather die trying than anything else. To be forced into being a villain, now that was something that set him off. It was disgusting. Bakugou would have never admitted out loud, but Deku's passion for becoming the best hero rivaled his own. It wasn't the first time Izuku Midoriya sat next to Shigaraki Tamura. So close, and so threatening. This time, the boy some people called Deku was sitting in a wooden chair, his hands and legs restraining back as Tamura pulled up a bar chair and sat in front of him. This time was different than the first for obvious reasons, but the main struggle ran through Deku's mind. How do I get out of this situation? There were no civilians that Tamura could threaten Deku with, but there were about 5 other villains that loomed over him, watching every single one of his movements. It wasn't like he could move much anyways. Deku was starting to feel all of the pain that had saved itself for a time. He wasn't running around fueled on a great heaping pile of adrenaline. He was in no condition to fight. Well, this isn't what I wanted. Not at all. Tamura's head dipped low, a hand moving back to scratch his neck idly. But now that you're here, I'm sure we can figure something out. Deku kept his head low, thinking of a strategy as he waited. There wasn't much for him to do at that moment, since there were so many villains surrounding him, and he didn't know all of their quirks. He knew for certain that Tamura in front of him could disintegrate once he got all his fingers wrapped around him. Okay, avoid his hands. But the bartender over to the side with the mist floating around him was a tricky one. Warp gates for teleportation means that he'll be able to bring in reinforcements. It was too risky to move even with just him around. As for every other villain inside that room, there was no room for guesses. What Deku didn't know, he didn't know. The possibility of escape was slim. The best course of action would be keeping himself alive long enough till he's rescued. You know, I really want to kill you. Tamura's voice felt like a knife cutting through him. Deku shivered but kept his face hard, unwilling to cooperate. But I'm thinking that you're going to be great bait now, for All Might. He rubbed his neck, leaning over his chair with a hand reached out. Deku winced, moving his head farther back as the fingers approached him. I was thinking, right? That we use Bakugou and get him to join us. His strength, his entire character screams a villain. Tamura explained, laughing. You're wrong. Deku spat out, biting his lip right after. Kachan would never be persuaded to be a villain. He aims for the top, to be the #1 pro hero. Just like All Might. He didn't mention the name, knowing very well from the last time he and Tamura met that the villain absolutely detested him. Bringing him up might be a bad choice of words. Well, it doesn't matter what he wanted. I would have given him the option to join, but if he still refused, we would have made him anyways. You, though, I was thinking, and hear me out. He placed 2 fingers on Deku's forehead. Wouldn't it be better for the story if the person that turned villain was the hero? Deku swallowed. What is he saying? Like, how much more fun would that be? Sure, we take the kid that already seems like a villain, turn him into a villain, but you, Mr. #1's fanboy. Imagine if you were the one to turn into a villain. Tamura explained, his teeth showing as a wide grin spread across his face, the same one that left Deku shivers down his spine back at the shopping outlet. You know how much more people would despair? How much All Might would despair? When he said his name, Tamura's voice was lowered and laced with disgust. No, I'm never going to be a villain. No matter what you do. Deku screamed out, his eyes already brimming with tears. He came so far to become a hero, there was no way they can persuade him, no matter what kind of quirk one of them had. If it was a brainwashing quirk again, he'll figure something out. There was a limit too, he just had to exploit it to the best he can. He could do this, his spirit was strong, it's always been strong, Deku just had to. Tamura. The voice came from a screen. Everyone turned to look at the source of the fuzzy voice. Shigaraki Tamura got out of his seat and headed over to the screen. Sensei, I need your help. I think it's time to get little Midoriya on our side. Tamura held his hands out, similar to a child pleading for a toy. A wise decision, Tamura. I'll prepare. In the meantime, break his spirit. The voice on the screen went dead, and Deku's eyes shot up as Tamura straightened his back. He turned and headed over to Deku, eyes widened with madness as he grabbed a hold of Deku's shoulders, one pinky up. You should be lucky, getting a private lesson from Sensei himself. At least before then, I can play around with you for a bit. The pinky went down. All fingers were on Deku's shoulder, and his clothes had started tearing away, then his skin. Stop! Deku screamed out, feeling his shoulder be torn apart slowly, crumbling away as the muscles below it blistered and screeched. He had seen Aizawa Sensei's elbow been touched and disintegrated, but the feeling was so much worse than it looked. He gritted his teeth, trying not to scream and give Tamura the satisfaction, but once he placed his other hand on the other shoulder, Deku cried out, tears rolling down his face as both of his shoulders began disintegrating slowly. It was only his shoulders, but it felt like his entire body was being pulled apart, piece by piece. It didn't feel like someone was pulling away a whole piece, but instead someone was grabbing at Deku's skin, pulling it out, and cutting small pieces at a time while keeping their grip. The pain was nearly unbearable. If Deku didn't have a high tolerance for pain, he might have passed out, even considering the wounds and bruises he sustained while fighting Muscular earlier. Deku moved to bit down on his lip, to try and focus on that pain as blood seeped down both his shoulders and now his bottom lip. In his head he screamed, louder and louder. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, All Might. I'm sorry, everyone please. Tears continued to roll down his cheek, his shoulders looking nothing like red, bloody splotches before Tamura let go. I can't wait to meet the change you. Make sure you thank Sensei for his gift. Consider it the best kind of power-up. Tamura's grin appeared once more as black, gooey liquid came pouring out of Deku's mouth and enveloped him, transporting him away. Tamura looked down at the empty chair, grinning before he turned towards the door. A knock. Pizza delivery! He only grinned wider. Everything was black. The darkness was heavy, and it didn't feel like the usual darkness of the night. He had ended up on the floor somewhere, hard and cold. Concrete probably. Deku's body screamed out in agony, as the waves of nerve splitting from his shoulders transported its way down to his entire nervous system. He nearly choked out a sob before hearing a cold, elderly voice. Oh dear, that Tamura did quite a job on you, didn't he? Don't mind him, he seemed to be very excited by you being here. Out of the darkness stepped an older man, with a deformed face and a dark suit dressed him well. Deku felt the air turn extremely cold, the atmosphere become dangerously ill. This man screamed of pure evil. Deku tried to move himself away, but screamed out in pain as his body twisted onto itself, both from his shoulder wounds and previous overexertion. Don't worry now, let me help you. The man leaned down and placed his hand on Deku's face. His eyes widened before he felt his entire body tense up. An almost cooling, calming wave spread across his entire body, fixing his wounds both externally and internally. It wasn't like Recovery Girl's power where it sped up a person's healing process. This quirk was a healing quirk altogether that had no repercussions. It felt too good, almost enough for Deku to sigh and smile in relief, but considering he was being healed by the villain, the feeling was bittersweet. His body rebuilt itself, patching up every last wound that he accumulated over the course of the few days. Deku couldn't help but feel refreshed. Your face. The man spoke up, reminding Deku where he was and that the man's hand was still on his face. That's strange. Might sound odd, but your face reminds me of my younger brother. Deku's eyes widened at the implication. He slowly turned towards him, swallowing hard as his voice refused to be let out. He did his best to stutter out are you all for one? The man only grinned. Deku froze. This was the man that All Might was destined to fight and defeat. No, it was the man that Deku had to defeat. Everything One for All accumulated to was in order to stop this evil that was now standing in front of him. So you are my brother? I suppose not technically, but... The man's hand left Deku's have and went down to his arm, helping him up and steadying the boy. If Deku didn't know anything was that going on, it was almost as if a kind gentleman had given him assistance off the floor. You are so much like him. Tell me, Izuku, before receiving One for All, what was your quirk? Deku refused to say anything. Whether it was from defiance or pure terror, he couldn't open his mouth. A hand went up to his forehead. A thumb onto his forehead gave All for One the answer. Quirkless. You really are my brother, aren't you? Izuku, you have no idea how happy it makes me to know that you will be alongside Tamira now. When I was younger, I longed for my brother to be by my side. Finally, I can live through Tamira and you. Before Deku could react, the man wrapped his arms around him in an embrace. Deku didn't know what was happening. He was terrified, frozen with absolute horror as this name, the one that is deemed the purest of evils, was hugging him like they were old friends. Now then, let's get to work. Two hands grabbed a hold of Deku's head as his entire mind blacked out. Izuku Midoriya sniffed. The young boy, only about the age of 5, sat on the ground with bruises and cuts from scraping the ground. Looking up, he saw Katsuki Bakugou, his hands cupped as small explosions lit up. A few other students from their preschool had gathered around to watch him use his quirk. See, Deku, my quirk is so much cooler. I can beat you now, but when you get your quirk, I'll still beat you. He laughed before walking away. Right. When Izuku gets his quirk, he'll be able to become a great hero. He'll rival Bakugou. He'll be just like All Might. Except, he never got his quirk. Time flashed forward. The constant teasing from Bakugou became more and more degrading, but Izuku had held on to his All Might action figure and shouted back once. Just you wait, Ka-chan! I can still be a hero, even without a quirk. The phrase was met with an explosion to the face and let Izuku on the ground. Shut up, Deku! You're useless! Quirkless piece of shit! He laughed. Izuku hated the name Deku. More time flashed. He was going to apply for UA, despite everyone's disbelief. Even if he was quirkless, they had changed the rules to state that even people without a quirk were able to apply. Even if no one had been accepted on those merits, there was still a chance. Hey, I got an idea. If you really want a quirk, why don't you swan dive off the roof and die? Then you can reborn with one. Izuku winced, staring at Ka-chan with tears brimming in his eyes, as usual. The fierce boy only threatened him with more explosions. It wasn't like Izuku hadn't thought about something like that before. Every night he considered ways to obtain a quirk. Maybe if he threw himself into a vast of toxic waste? No, it was okay. Because he could become a hero without one, right? Life at home was quiet. Both his parents went across borders to work, but Izuku knew it was because they wanted nothing to do with him. He never knew his father much anyways. But Izuku could tell that his mother felt guilty about not being able to pass down her quirk to him. He didn't care if he was quirkless, he just wished his mother showed him more support. He had finally met his idol. On a rare chance that Izuku was taken by a villain, and out of all of the heroes that could have rescued him, it was the one and only All Might. Izuku had to take the chance presented to him. He had to ask him, the person he looked up to the most, and the person who will tell him what he wanted to hear. Even if I don't have a quirk, can I still be a hero? The now frail-looking All Might only shook his head. Rejection. Flat-out refusal. His number one hero, All Might, had told him no, he could never be a hero. Deep down, Izuku should have known this. He knew deep down that it was impossible for him, so why did he hold on to hope for so long? Why did All Might tell him no? Why? Why couldn't he be a hero? Izuku had walked straight to school after that. He climbed up onto the school roof and looked down at the city he longed to protect. Tears rolled down his eyes as he looked at the hero notebook he'd been creating for himself. When he becomes a hero, there was no use for it. He threw it off the roof, flinging it over the fence, crying out loudly as he watched his dream disappear into the ground below. Izuku took a moment to reconsider what he was doing. What was he doing? There wasn't anything left for him. He was useless. Quirkless. There wasn't anything Izuku wanted to be but a hero, and he couldn't. It was reality now. He took the time to think of those around him. He didn't have any friends, and Kachan was the one that suggested the plan really, so he wouldn't care if he left the earth. His parents had left him long ago, and now his one shining hope had gave him the slap in the face reality has been trying to scream at him for the longest time. He wondered if there were heroes who specialized in suicide prevention. Izuku never recalled hearing about a hero like that, which made him laugh. He was too useless to even be saved by something like this. There was no one left in the world for him, no one to protect. He truly believed that maybe if he did jump, he could be reborn. With one hand on the fence, he began climbing up on it. No one stopped him, either because they didn't see him, or no one truly cared anyways. That's what Izuku thought. Sitting on top of the wired fence, he tried to think of reasons to get himself down, to stop what he was doing. I like eating katsudon. If I die, I can't eat that, he told himself, but frowned. He could eat some if he was reborn anew. Maybe he'd like something else. I really like my shoes. He could jump with his shoes on. Maybe he'd be reborn with them. Everything Izuku thought was minimal, absolutely useless, just like him. Even he wasn't able to think of ways to prevent himself from jumping. He couldn't even save himself. With one last look to the sky, he tried to imagine All Might, in his hero form, coming towards him and stopping him, grabbing him and holding him, telling him that he's wanted and he's still someone with passion. You can still be a hero. He wished for that to happen, but once he was plummeting to the ground, he realized that no one was going to rescue him. Maybe he just wasn't worth being saved. At the last second, Izuku closed his eyes, tranquility washing over him. When he opened his eyes, he was on a bed. A man with a scarred face and a black suit sat beside him. Next to him was a young man, older than Izuku, with gray hair and chapped lips. Izuku's hand flew behind him, his instincts kicking in. He tried to find his backpack to offer the young man some Vaseline that he always kept in the front pocket. It was great for cuts and wounds that he got often as a child. You're awake. Young man, you gave us quite a scare. The man spoke, leaning over to look at him. Where am I? That's what Izuku had wanted to say, but instead, the first thing that comes out of his mouth is, I'm sorry. The younger man raised an eyebrow. You take a jump off a roof and you're apologizing? Geez, how fucking twisted are you? The older man didn't say anything to that. He kept his face turned to Izuku. Tell me, dear boy, why did you do it? Izuku's heart ached as he spilled all of his feelings out to two strangers. Everything from his goal to be a hero, to the constant bullying for being quirkless, to how he came home to no one, to finally meeting All Might and then being told he couldn't be a hero. His life was shattered at that instant. Life was no longer meaningless. All Might, huh? What a joke! The younger man hissed out, placing his fists on the bed, keeping his fingers away. Listen, kid, just because that excuse of a hero told you that you couldn't be one, doesn't mean you listen. His voice grew with animosity, something Izuku hadn't heard before when talking about the number one pro hero. Izuku Midoriya, it seems that we stopped you from death, but what will you do now? The older man asked. Izuku sat up in the bed, gripping the blanket and biting his lip. Nothing changed really, his resolve to die was still there. He was silent. Izuku. The man spoke again, using his first name fondly. It almost felt like a father who was giving his son advice. What if I told you that you can be a hero? Izuku turned to face the man. But how? He asked, tears brimming again. I don't have a quirk dash. What if I told you I could give you one? The room went silent. Izuku stared at him, then to the younger man to see if he was bluffing in some sort, if this was all a practical joke. So many questions ran through the young boy's mind. Too many questions. Why me? Was all Izuku managed to say, clutching at his chest. Because from just knowing you now, I know that your passion is true. You have the heart of a hero, and I can't sit idly by and watch you destroy your life. So if you'll agree, join me. Us. I'll make sure that you become a hero that's even better than All Might. One that will look to a child and tell them you can be a hero. A hand extended. With a sniff and a sob, Izuku accepted. Izuku. All for one spoke up, letting go of Deku's head. The black goo wrapped itself around the young boy, leaving only his face there as a new hero suit was placed on him. It was the one that Izuku had imagined for himself, but with alterations Sensei provided. His new implanted memories will adjust soon, and for good measurement, Sensei had given him a hidden quirk that would pair nicely with his newfound, altered mind. Sensei? Deku looked up, then from left and right. Sensei, where are we? What's going on? We're at the Numa base. It appears that we have been found by the heroes. You were stunned for a while. Do you remember anything? He asked, not really interested in an actual response before turning towards the front of the building. They would come soon. I remember being with Tomo-chan. Did Kurojiiri transported me here? He asked, concern growing as he clenched his fists and got ready for whoever was coming. The building had been brought down by Mount Lady. Deku had put himself in front of his sensei to block whatever debris would be flying over there. Let me handle this, Izuku. All for one spoke before walking out of the dark side of the building they were. Even with beast genus intuition, Deku knew that it was no use for his sensei. The musculoskeletal coiling matched with air propulsion had sent the pro-heroes flying backwards, destroying the neighborhood they were in. Noticing that Best Genist had taken his comrades out of the blast range, Sensei laughed and began clapping. As expected of the number 4 hero, I was trying to blast everyone away, but in an instant you controlled everyone's clothes and pulled them out of the way. Your judgment, your technique, you've got nerve of steel. Isn't that so, Izuku? The young boy beamed, following his sensei out into the light. That's definitely Best Genist for you. Not only does he have a versatile quirk that can affect anyone who's wearing clothes, he's also known for his swift judgment. That could never be taken from his knowledge and admiration for heroes. It was one thing Sensei felt needed to stay. From then on, the battle ensured. Tamura had been brought over with the other villains, much to his relief. He was ready to leave though, reluctant knowing he had to assist Tamura in any way he could until All Might came crashing in, saying his name. It made his stomach churn. He didn't need saving, and never from him. That time had passed. DKU! Now that was a name he hadn't heard in a very long time. Everyone in the base referred to him as Izuku, sometimes Izkin, but that name laced with a specific voice, Deku, couldn't help but smile. Finally, it was his time to shine. To meet his rival, he jolted towards him and punched him square in the face. Everything after that was fueled by excitement and adrenaline. Kachan was here. He had friends too. It made Deku's stomach churn with both joy and envy. He wasn't ready to confront his childhood friend, but it didn't stop from him making a monologue of his past. Deku was a chatterbox anyhow, so being able to finally give the world his backstory had excited him. It might have been the rush of excitement that stunted Deku's rational strategy. He had forgotten the friends that were with Kachan, so when an ice barricade was built he grew annoyed. Kachan and the others had made their way, and Deku had wearily announced his resentment to his previously favorite hero. He eventually left, watching as his sensei have his last fight with One for All. He landed next to Tamura in an unknown location with the rest of the villains, standing there, staring at him. Deku's first instincts were to go to Tamura. Tomo-chan, are you alright? He took a hold of his shoulder. Shigaraki Tamura would have slapped him away, but he remembered what his sensei told him. The boy would be key to their success. He had a suspicion that the boy was now brainwashed, having different memories implanted that showed Tamura as someone to be respected and cared for. Not only a few moments before was Tamura grabbing Deku's shoulder and making him cry in agony, destroying his skin. Now he was holding his shoulder, asking if he was alright. He grinned. I'm fine, Izuku. We have to support Sensei now. They all looked around, turning to see a small TV against the wall. Unknown to either of them, the memories that Sensei had implanted into Izuku Midoriya had made Shigaraki Tamura seem like an older brother. It was obvious once someone thought about it. If Tamura were to be the successor of All for One and Izuku was the successor of One for All, then he wanted to parallel his own relationship with his brother. All the memories pointed towards Tamura as his friend. someone who had given him hope when no one else was there. Whether Tamura liked that or not, he would soon find out that he himself needed someone like Izuku in his life. A younger apprentice who now shared the same drive. The boy that once looked up to All Might was now his, their goal the same. Snuff out the flames of the previous one for all. If they had met under different circumstances, would they have gotten alone? The artificial Tamura in Deku's memories was obviously designed to keep the illusion as realistic as possible. But the villain wondered how much if it would really be his responses and actions. It dawned on him that he might have actually liked Izuku, his drive and his intelligence if it wasn't for the boy's love and admiration for All Might. Now that the drive was destroyed and recreated, however, it meant that Tamura could use the boy the way he liked. Actually get along with him, and he'll still follow Tamura around like a dog. The two of them had cried when they watched their sensei be taken away. Tamura was ready to throw a fit, a tantrum, and destroy everything that was in that dark space. Kurogiri was ready to transport his hands away if he were to touch one of them, but Deku had come over and placed a hand on his shoulder once more, smiling through his tears. "It's your time, Toma-chan," he told him. In that instant, Tamura almost took that smile to be a reminiscence of All Might, but came to realize that it was a smile from Izuku Midoriya's heart that made him actually calm down. He nodded. He was going to take down All Might, and his special weapon was standing willing next to him, ready to risk his life for him. Tamura was ready to destroy All Might and deny him everything. He couldn't wait to see the number one hero's reaction to Deku taking all of the hits from all of the heroes to protect him. The despair that was coming was inevitable. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. The possibilities were truly mind-blowing. If you found this video entertaining and thought-provoking, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-if stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep embracing the power of imagination.